time for our key session led by a transformationalist who has been at the forefront of a massive digital transformation campaign for Chalhoub Group. We are delighted to have Rooijen, the Chief Ecommerce Officer of the Chalhoub Group, the largest luxury retailer in the Middle East, from trading and marketing to product and operations. His team focuses on customer-centric approach, omni-channel experiences, and he will speak today on smart marketing and how to deploy artificial intelligence, AI, to get real-time insights. Please welcome on stage Rooijen. Over to you, Rooijen.
Thank you, Ziza. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rooijen, and it's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Now, just before I arrived here, I was picking up my 16-month-old from nursery. And as I was leaving with him, I could see all these crying children being carried out by their parents, so eager to leave. So I appreciate I'm the final speaker for the day, but my benchmark is this. I hope that none of you will be crying when you leave here at 4 p.m. So fingers crossed. So I'm the Chief E-commerce Officer for the Shalu Group. Now, some of you might already be familiar with the organization, but for those of you who are not, ours is a group that was founded more than 65 years ago. We are a leading retailer, distributor, and luxury partner here within the GCC. And what started with one small boutique in Damascus in 1955 has grown into a business representing more than 300 brands with nearly 800 stores, more than 12,000 employees, and more than 50 websites and apps, and counting. And I love looking at this timeline. I'm sure I'm a bit of a history buff and I'm fascinated by the history of the region, but there's more to it than that. You see, to paraphrase Maya Angelou, if you don't know where you've come from, it's hard to know where you're going. And sure, at first glance, it might seem like there is a gulf between this small boutique in 1955 and a Gen Z Saudi girl sitting there in Jeddah, social shopping on her phone. But the reality is that both those scenarios are driven by our mission to exhilarate and delight our customers, to meet them where they are. At the end of the day, across these 6+ decades, our mission hasn't changed. But of course, a mission alone isn't going to get you where you want to go. The other side of the coin is culture. You need to truly be customer-centric in your DNA. And I want to share something with you that I think really illustrates this point well when it comes to our group. Sadly, last month, our founder and chairman, Michel Chalhoub, passed away. And his son, our current group president, Patrick Chalhoub, posted the following on LinkedIn. Over 6 decades ago, at the age of 23, my father laid down certain unspoken values. Since then, we have lived and breathed these values centered around respect for all, striving for excellence, and building an entrepreneurial mindset. Much later, in the early 2000s, we formally adopted these values as the cornerstone of the family business. Now, the thing that really resonated with me was that term unspoken. For more than 5 decades, before PowerPoint was even invented, people lived these values before they even appeared on a piece of paper or a slide. And this to me is critical, right? We know that 9 out of 10 digital transformations fail. People talk about building modern marketing or e-commerce organizations, and they build these beautiful decks, and then they say, but why did our program fail? And the answer, of course, is that it's not enough to have words on a slide. It needs to be truly embedded in the culture. Now, some of you might roll your eyes and say, but Rooijen, isn't that kind of always the thing with digital, right? That you're customer-centric? Maybe. But from my own experience, I think maybe not. You see, more than 15 years ago, I started my career as a web developer. And I remember working on my first major website, spending weeks and weeks, getting the code just right, including all the latest, coolest JavaScript, making sure I had my content neatly outlined. And then finally the day came to user test it. And so there, my first user sat. And in the beginning, she found it difficult to figure out how to go from the splash page to the home page. So I had to kind of show her where to click. And then on the home page, she said, I can't see the text. And I go, shoot, that's because on your computer, you haven't yet installed the fonts, the custom fonts for the websites. Let me show you how to install those custom fonts. And then a couple of minutes later, the fonts were installed, the page reloaded. And she turns to me and goes, this font is so confusing, I can't read anything. And at that moment, I lost my cool and I said, what the hell, Mom? I worked so hard on this. You're the worst. Of course, the reality is my mom's not the worst. She's a fantastic lady and I have a vast amount of respect for her. The fact is, my website was the worst. I had gotten so caught up in including all these latest, technological widgets that I'd learned that I completely lost track of the fact that the purpose of a website is to serve its visitors. It's to communicate information clearly. And this is one big reason why digital projects go astray. It's so easy to become enamored with the technology that you forget the actual purpose. But there's another reason beyond technology. And that is that sympathy is a lot easier than empathy. Now, at this point, you say, Ryan, listen, enough with the word games, but bear with me, because there's a big difference. Sympathy is seeing someone with blisters on their feet and going, gee, that sucks. Empathy is walking a mile in that person's shoes to understand how they got the blisters in the first place. And so, when it comes to building these modern, intelligent organizations, the first type of intelligence that I believe we need to start with is actual emotional intelligence. Because by empathizing with your audience, by empathizing deeply with your customers, you're able to understand those customer journeys in far greater and richer detail than you would otherwise have been able to. And this is absolutely vital. Because without these customer journeys, it is very difficult to find the appropriate direction. And we all know that there are so many fantastic tools and solutions out there. I mean, just take a look in the hallway. It's easy to get lost if you don't know what you're solving for. Now, some of you might have a finance background. So you might be sitting here going, Ryan, that's fine, but let's talk about the real stuff. Let's talk about cost. Customer satisfaction ratings are fine and empathy and blah, 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 but what about my ROI, right? My return on investment? Fair play. Except I actually think cost is a bit derivative. And I mean this in the most literal sense. You see, I used to work for Google, and one reason why companies like Google or TikTok or Facebook have done so incredibly well is that they managed to solve a particular thorny problem. In the old days, advertising and customer engagement used to be diametrically opposed to kind of cost models. And you would effectively pay more to annoy your customers more. And now, of course, what happens is that the more engaging your content, the more relevant your ads, the less money you end up paying. The higher your click-through rate or view-through rate on modern advertising platforms, the lower your costs become. In other words, if you optimize as a first order priority for this customer journey, for this customer experience, those cost efficiencies will automatically follow. So to me, it's a false dichotomy to say, well, should we pursue these soft metrics or these, financial hard metrics? The reality is they're one and the same, just separated by 1 degree. And of course, when we talk about these customer journeys, we have hard data. Sure, back in the day, if you want to understand your customers, it was primarily about surveys, right, or focus groups, and these were difficult. Firstly, because a lot of people lie, which is tricky. They want to please the interviewer. But the other reason is that, these methods are slow, right? They're difficult to scale, and they're frequently expensive to do well. And this, of course, is where big data comes into play. Remember when you could say that in 2012 and people were like, wow, it's so cool. Now people go, whatever, I don't care. The big data, that's what it was, right? The fact that you can suddenly collect data on a much larger scale. And what's interesting is that when we talk about customer data, often we almost think of this in a microscopic sense, right? You're kind of zooming into individual preferences. You can create these fantastic personalized experiences. But the value is actually also the inverse. It's the fact that instead of a microscope, data can act as a macroscope, right? Instead of seeing that which is small, you can see that which is big. All of a sudden, you can understand the behaviors and preferences of your entire audience, and not just of select people that you've decided to interview. The question then becomes, once you have your customer journeys, how do you identify the key moments within your journeys where you want to collect these digital breadcrumbs? And here, of course, there's no set answer. It truly depends on the use case. In the case that you're looking to optimize advertising, right, you might be collecting data on click-through, right, or engagement with the ad format in some other fashion. If you want to know whether people are actually reading and engaging with content, you probably want to look at dwell time. And if you're looking at purchase intent, what better than to look at add to carts, right, or even completed checkouts? But it's important to note that having data is not the same as having insight. Almost exactly 8 years ago, I was about to start a new job as Google's global insight lead. Now, even at that time, Google had not terabytes or petabytes, but exabytes of data, astronomical volumes of data. And yet they needed an insights lead. Why? Well, the answer is that having data is not enough. You need insight. You need to identify the patterns, the trends, the so what. Can you come up with something that's credible, that's novel, that's actionable, and that instructs you in terms of how to act? So when we talk about building intelligent organizations, driving these efficiencies in marketing and e-commerce, it's not enough to talk about the data collection. It's critical that we're able to build the capabilities to derive these insights as well. So the journey ends up looking a little bit like this. First, you empathize with your target audience, with your customers, with your partners, to truly understand their journeys, the frictions, their need states. Then you decide to collect data at the appropriate steps in those journeys. And then finally, you analyze that data in order to extract insights. And of course, the beauty is once you have those insights, there's almost a flywheel that starts to be set in motion, right? The type of insight you have can allow you to better empathize with your audience. It can allow you to optimize these journeys. It can even tell you how to collect different types of data to develop an even better understanding, right? It's the ultimate gift that keeps on giving. Now, I know you're thinking, Ryan, this is fine and everything, but I came here to hear about AI. I hear you. AI is cool. We've all seen and loved WALL-E, I'm sure. We're not there yet with artificial intelligence, right? We don't yet have general AI that can feel and love and look longingly up at the stars with a little magnesium and aluminium alloy body. Right now, artificial intelligence is effectively just a means of automating that process of going from data to insight. In its simplest form, it's a thermostat. Hey, you're collecting a whole bunch of temperature data. You see that the trend is going in a certain direction. So the agent, maybe your Nest thermostat, thinks to itself, okay, I need to start cooling down this room because otherwise I'm not going to get the outcome I want. In more advanced settings, this can relate to creative optimization. Hey, I'm seeing a pattern in what types of customers react to what types of visual elements. Let's include more or less of those. It can relate to pricing. Hey, we've seen competitive activity in certain verticals. How do we adjust our pricing to optimize our offer? Or it can relate to on-site experiences. Hey, we know that these and these and these items always do well during these kind of time periods. Let's show more of them. But the most important thing here is that AI should not be the first step in this process. Because unless you already know what data you're collecting, unless you already are aware of the process of going from data to insight, AI is just going to be an expensive investment that is not going to yield results. But if you have that journey mapped out, if you already have that initial machinery in place, AI is a means of supercharging this, of taking grunt work and repeated efforts out of the loop so that you can refocus your human resources on greater value-adding tasks. And this value-adding task element is important because the world of ours is not only accelerating, but it's growing in complexity. We all know that omni-channel is the coolest thing. People don't care about just having a store or an app. They want everything. They want that. They want social platforms. They want affiliates. They want marketplaces. They want pop-ups. They want WhatsApp clienteling. All of it. And this is not just a linear growth in complexity. It's an exponential one, of course, because for every single customer touch point you add, that touch point is interacting with every previous touch point. So the number becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And therefore, building these types of effective machinery that allow you to optimize these customer journeys, that allow you as an organization to become more and more intelligent, are not just a race against competition, they're a race against time. Keeping up with the consumer, especially the young, aware, and demanding consumer, is a constant challenge. Now, the sad news is that there's no shortcuts, right? There is a reason that so many of these types of transformation projects and investments fail. This stuff really is difficult, but there's hope. And one of the best ways I have found of dealing with this and mitigating some of this complexity is very simple. It's humility. Now, it sounds like a bit of a lame thing to come up with, but I'm dead serious. Because if you have humility, not just as a person, but as an organization, that means that you don't assume that things have been resolved. You don't assume that you have the answer. You're constantly on the lookout, scanning the horizon for new trends and disruptors. It means that you are listening at all times to your own employees, your partners, your customers, to try and understand how you need to deal with change. It means that you're not trying to centrally control and manage everything. It means that you're willing to decentralize, to empower others, which then obviously alleviates the central pressure and de-risks your enterprise. And finally, it also prevents you from falling in this trap whereby you convince yourself that as long as you invest in the latest technology, your problems are going to be solved. So in conclusion, if you only remember 3 things from this presentation today, let them please be these 3 things. Firstly, yes, we all know that intelligent organizations require data. But if data is the new oil, then culture is the soil. It is difficult to nurture and see a project like this flourish without the proper values and corporate DNA in place. Secondly, yes, AI is a very cool end state to get to. And I very much, on a personal level, enjoy these types of technologies as well. But in order to get there, what's most important is emotional intelligence, the ability to build relationships, then the kind of cognitive and technical intelligence required to actually understand and leverage the data. And then finally, as an end state, do you get to AI? And thirdly and finally, yes, we live in an accelerating world with a scary amount of complexity. But a bit of humility goes a long way to addressing that. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for this inspiring and empowering presentation. It was really brilliant. Thank you so much. And now, with this, we'll wrap up day 1 of the Vibe Martech Fest. I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. We've witnessed truly engaging and inspiring sessions today by some of the biggest names and speakers in the industry. And tomorrow, promises to be bigger, starting with a keynote by Sir Martin Sorrell. I'm sure everyone heard of him, culminating with the Vibe Martech Awards and the Women in Martech Awards, my personal favorite. We have also sneaked in a fun surprise session just before the awards. To find out about it, you have to attend tomorrow's event. I would also like to thank one more time all our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Sprinkler, our platinum sponsors, Salesforce, Gold Partners, Telium, Sitecore, Zoho, WebEngage, our silver sponsors, CleverTap, ObservePoint, Branch, Netcore, our associate sponsor, Apple's Flyer, Epsilon, our bronze sponsor, Merkle, and our networking sponsor, American Eagle. Your partnership has powered the VMF contribution to the growth of the MarTech in the region. Now, our event hostesses will pass by just to do a quick survey. So just spare 5 minutes of your time, just maybe 2-3 minutes of your time to share your opinion about the event. And thank you one more time. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for the day 2 of the MarTech Fest. Until then, take care, stay well, and stay safe. Bye-bye. Thank you.